Okay, here we go. It is opening day across, much of Major League Baseball. The Yankees and Giants opened up on Wednesday night, most of baseball here on Thursday, as I mentioned. And then the Jays and a couple other teams holding off until Friday. And part of that is just, we have a roof, and so we don't need the built-in off day. That is why the opening weekend is often so wonky across Major League Baseball. Matt Robinson with you in the TCA studio in beautiful Bytown, Canada. And if we're being real, beautiful Bytown, Canada, it's a little wet. It's kind of rainy. It might snow again. It's March in Ottawa, so that's what that looks like. What the beer looks like here today just comes from an oldie but a goodie. This is the Headstock West Coast IPA from Nickelbrook Brewing Company. We'll enjoy that as we talk to our buddy Arden Zwelling, a craft beer guy himself, down in Toronto, covers the Blue Jays for Sportsnet, is on one of the Smarter Blue Jays podcasts called At the Letters, produced, of course, by Sportsnet, with his co-host Ben Nicholson-Smith. He'll be on your TV throughout the summer. He'll be writing for Sportsnet.ca. Bunch of stuff I want to talk to him about here on the Blue Jays front. I want to thank you, most of you, for your feedback on the last episode. Gently titled, perhaps provocatively titled, Brady Tkachuk blew it. Some passionate opinions on that. And that's been fun, honestly. He put himself in an interesting spot by having a lot to say on his own podcast and then having a similar situation present itself to him very soon afterwards. I do think in this weird hockey culture way, this is why guys don't put themselves out there very much. I guess good on him for wanting to talk. Not so good on him for not answering properly when somebody spoke back on the ice. That is up now at tallcanaudio.com. If you missed it, the one before that, our buddy Graham Nichols from the Hockey News and the Coming in Hot podcast co-hosted on Monday. Lots there on the hockey playoff races and everything else going on there. And I can tell you that on Friday, a little later on in the morning than usual, but our friend Kenny Walls from TSN 1200 will be on the podcast. It is the beginning of the OHL playoffs. We'll ask him about that. And, the show often ends up veering off into some crazy other places. So we'll get to all kinds of stuff with Kenny when he's in here. And then on Monday, it's been a couple of weeks, but Rob makes his return to the studio on the Monday edition of the podcast. With all that out of the way, and with this West Coast IPA from Nickelbrook in hand, the Headstock, let's talk to our buddy Arden Zwelling. How are you, man? What's going on?
Good. Thanks for having me. Good to be here. Looking forward to getting this season going.
I'm curious, man. It's Thursday as you and I sit here and chat. Did you have any time, because I know it's been a wild week for you, to check out the first of 3 opening days for Major League Baseball on Netflix? Because people seem to have opinions. Did you catch much of it?
I honestly didn't. To be totally honest with you, I was in bed at like 8:30 p.m. on Wednesday night. So I prioritized catching up on sleep. So I just saw the highlights in the morning.
All right, well, then I won't, you know how it is, man. Twitter always has opinions.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have any hot takes on the commentary or
the commentary was fine. It was just Netflix, as Netflix does, is going to jam every main character from every one of their other series somehow into your baseball broadcast now, and cross promotion and all these sorts of things. People weren't loving it.
I think that's the idea, isn't it? That's why they're doing this. They want you to watch the other stuff.
100%.
They want you to stick around.
This is it. So, look, you are just back from Florida. I'm curious if I could pick your brain. We'll look back just a little bit before we look forward to what does a World Baseball Classic spring training look like? And obviously, the teams themselves probably don't love seeing their pitchers take off, and there's all kinds of rules in terms of pitch limits and all these sorts of things, but you're always worried that your guy is going to be the Edwin Diaz of this year or whatever may happen. But I'm curious what's left at spring training and how it might impact the guys left at camp and the entire Blue Jays infield was gone and they're getting their at-bats and they're getting whatever, but it's not the same as working with your teammates. What does it look like around spring training when everybody disappears for a World Baseball Classic?
Yeah, it looks like a lot of like worried and uneasy coaches, front office folks who are, as you said, fingers crossed, toes crossed, clutching horseshoes or four-leaf clovers or whatever that nobody gets hurt while they're over there. And as far as players go, obviously it means more opportunity for guys, particularly around the infield. So Brandon Valenzuela behind the dish, or Josh Kasevich at short, and Charles McAdoo at third base, Josh Rivera at second base, Sean Keyes was out there a lot at first. So it was cool to see those guys get some really valuable reps and experience. But the trade off for that is, as you mentioned, you're not gaining that familiarity among the guys who are actually going to be there on opening day and actually going to be manning these positions during the regular season. So but I think that, look, anybody could play well with Andres Jimenez up the middle. I mean, he's just same, same could be said with Ernie Clement. Like those guys are just so natural. Okamoto was playing third at the WBC, so I think that that's fine. He was still getting the reps there, and Vladdy is just a sound first baseman no matter what. So you wouldn't be too worried about them. I think it's more so the reps of Alejandro Kirk just catching the new pitchers like Dylan Cease and Cody Ponce. He missed out on those, and I mean that's really valuable. It's just getting on the same page, understanding how pitchers want you to set up and how they want you to call their games, what kind of tempo and pacing they like to have. Just kind of getting to that point where you can kind of complete each other's sentences as a battery, and as a pitcher and catcher. So I feel like that's what was missed out on, and that's what the Alejandro Kirk will be catching up on early in the season.
Do you feel like, and look, it's always rough to try and draw any conclusions on anything coming out of spring, even more so when that spring featured guys disappearing for a couple of weeks to go do the World Baseball Classic. But did you get any better sense, watching as little time as he did have, Cosma Okamoto at Blue Jays spring training, as to how he may adapt to major league pitching, whether he can do... I think it's asking a lot for anybody to fully replace Bo, and there are also different types of hitters. But do you have a different feeling about him? Anything surprise you about him based on what you got to see down in Dunedin?
It's so hard to sort of take an assessment like that away from spring training ABs, because you never know what the pitcher on the other side is working on. So the pitcher on the other side may be throwing pitches that he's never going to throw during the regular season in counts that he's never going to throw them in. He may be working on a changeup that isn't going to feature in the regular season. He may be just kind of pitching at 80 to 85% intensity and just trying to kind of take it easy and ramp up and not go too crazy. So Okamoto had a fine spring at the plate. I think he showed you the hit tool. I think he showed the pop. I think he showed the long plate appearances that he can work and the discipline and the walks that he can take. But doing that against pitchers in spring training is one thing. Doing it against Luis Severino on opening day is going to be another. So I think we really just need to see how things go over the first couple of months of the season. And I think it's probably best that everybody does give him like a span of months to show what he can do in the majors and get acclimated and sort of get his feet wet. Obviously, the Blue Jays would love if he gets off to a hot start, and it just looks like, I don't know why everybody complains about this transition. It was pretty easy for me. They'd obviously sign up for that, but if there is a transition period and if he does scuffle a little bit and there are times that he's just getting out on soft stuff away a lot, I think you really want to give him that time to adjust and to sort of figure it out, because there are a lot of differences between how you get pitched in Japan and in North America.
One of the other big shiny toys that the Blue Jays brought in this offseason was Dylan Cease. You got to look at him down there. Same thing. Like I know there would be days where they've told him, don't worry about the results, just go out and throw this, just try this. And so you never know exactly what a guy's working on, as you suggest, day to day. But were you able to take away anything in terms of, it's clear that the pitching staff here in Toronto wants him to try this or lean a little bit more on that? Or was it for him just getting his legs underneath him like any other spring?
Well, the biggest takeaway is just that the velocity and the stuff is there. I mean, I think he was like 99 in his first outing of spring and carrying that throughout camp. So like, that's good to see that he's healthy and feeling really good, coming off of, this is a guy who's made a lot of starts over his career, and he seems to have figured out the way to withstand that and the way to stay really fresh throughout that. So that's actually quite impressive to me. pitch wise, like he was going really deep into his arsenal, and I don't know that we'll see him go like quite that deep during the regular season. I mean, he was mostly fastball slider last year, and then mixing in a few curveballs, and then he would like mess around with a sinker and like a bigger slider and a changeup. Like he throws quite a few pitches, but I feel like during spring we saw a lot more sinkers than we'll probably see during the regular season. Probably a lot more curveballs and sort of sweepers, the bigger slider, than we'll see during the regular season, because he was just kind of messing around with those pitches and toying with them and seeing how they play off of one another and what type of sequences he can use and how they work to righties and lefties, etc. So I imagine that during the regular season, we'll see him be a lot more fastball slider dominant when it's really important that he gets the outs that he's trying to get. But I think that if he was able to just gain a better feel for some of those other secondary offerings as well during spring, that can only be a benefit. You know, we saw the Blue Jays sort of do that with Louis Varland last year, where he came over from Minnesota, where he was really only throwing two pitches, and all of a sudden they had him utilizing the depth of his arsenal and throwing like 91-mile-an-hour changeups all of a sudden, and that element of surprise really helped him out. So maybe we see some of that from Dylan Cease. It really just kind of remains to be seen what he carries into the regular season.
So it's the same baseball adage that everybody uses all the time. So you can never have too much pitching. And yet, when the Blue Jays went back to the well and signed Max Scherzer, you're like, where are all these guys going to fit, right? You got your Lauer, you got Scherzer, of course, you've got Ponce and Cease, and you've got Gosman, who nobody's talking about, even though he's finally getting himself an opening day start here in Toronto. It just felt like, man, I haven't even mentioned Yesevich and Bieber, and it was like, this seems redundant. And yet here we are on opening day, and it is anything but redundant. They've needed every one of these arms just to start the year. Can you give us an update on the three guys who are going to start, who we thought would be rotation arms and will be, but that are going to start on the IL here when it comes to Barrios and Yesavage and Bieber?
Yeah, so when it comes to Barrios and Yesavage, they might not be that far off. Like Yesavage continues to pitch in sim games down in Dunedin, so like he's continuing to be off the mound, and he was up to 35 pitches at the time that I left spring training. It's harder to sort of keep a handle on just where the pitch counts are at when you're not down there, but the idea was that he would continue building up from there. So he may not be that far off if he's recovering well between outings, and the stuff and the velo is where it needs to be. Like he's on a mound and pitching, so that's a good thing. Similarly with Jose Barrios, like he was pitching as much as anybody in camp before he had that MRI around the WBC, and the idea was that after he got checked out by Keith Meister in Texas, he was just going to take a couple of days down and then get back after it. So if he's back on a mound soon, that's another guy who maybe he's only missing 3 weeks to a month during the regular season, like Yesavage. Bieber is a guy who just hasn't been off the mound yet, so he is much further away. And once he gets on a mound, you really have to add like 6 weeks to that. So we're still a mound appearance away from being 6 weeks away with Shane Bieber. So he's the one who's further off. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's early May and we are like factoring in Yesavage and Barrios and trying to figure out how they fit into the rotation picture.
Is the Bieber thing alarming to you? There was all kinds of talk back in the fall that was he took the Blue Jay. Like a lot of people were surprised when he opted in, and a lot of people immediately jumped up and said, well, that's because there's something wrong with his arm and he better get what he can. And other people shouted that down right away, and yet we get to spring training. He is coming off Tommy John. He did pitch through the fall. Are you... I'm going to stick with alarmed. Is there anything alarming to you about Bieber and how this has started here this year?
Well, yeah, you can't have zero alarm or zero concern about it because he's coming off of Tommy John surgery, and now he's on the IL with elbow inflammation and forearm tightness, which is all right around where he had that surgery to repair his UCL. So I think that this so when he first came back with Cleveland, he had a setback and he had to do his ramp up process again. And he got through that with Toronto and obviously looked good when he debuted with Blue Jays after the trade. But then I think he just had to pitch a lot more over the rest of the season than anybody was anticipating. Like he makes 7 starts, throws 40 and a third innings over the rest of the regular season. And then into the playoffs, he's pitching like the most intense innings of his life. Like this is the guy who's never been to the World Series before and had never been beyond a DS with Cleveland. As he's trying to like get over Tommy John surgery and complete a rehab, and he would have had close to 20 innings in the postseason. So I just don't think that anyone was expecting that volume and intensity to be there for him. And clearly it took a toll, and clearly it caused his arm to not be where it needed to be at the beginning of this year to be ready for opening day. So of course there's alarm and concern there, particularly just when you're coming off of a major surgery like he had. But I think also the Blue Jays are going to be extremely cautious with this and extremely deliberate. So they're not going to push anything. So maybe if it's a different situation, maybe they are sort of pushing the rehab a little bit more, whereas now they're always going to err on the side of more caution, just to make sure that when he does return this year, he returns for good and pitches the rest of the season. So that I don't. It's not like high alarm or high concern, but there obviously has to be some, because of the reason why he isn't pitching with the Blue Jays right now.
So this is like chicken wing 3 or 4 on hot ones, not 9 or 10, right? This is sort of where look, you just got back from Dunedin, as we talked about. It's been a quick turnaround. You did end up staying down there a day longer than you were counting on. I know we talked about beforehand, but when you got back, they brought all the media down to the Dome. Mark Shapiro addressed the media. I don't know how much of what your responsibility would have been for Sportsnet. There was also some new changes around the Dome unveiled. Did you get a look at any, the big talk was the last 2 off seasons, right? The big renos, the serious renovations were going to be the last 2 off seasons. That didn't mean they were finished. There was some new stuff added this year. Did you get a look at any of that?
So I didn't go for that portion. There was a media tour, and everyone would have seen sort of the photos on social media from that.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of turned up for the baseball stuff in the second half. But it sounds like they've redone the 200 level behind home plate, and it looks really nice in photos. And then I think most meaningfully, they've just added a lot more memorabilia and installations around the 100 level, sort of celebrating the history of the franchise. And I think that's really important, because the Blue Jays just haven't done a good enough job of that over the first 49 years of
We're getting a
the
statue
team.
this year of a player.
That's right. You're getting a statue. You're getting a Hall of Excellence. I think you're just getting a lot more installations that fans can interact with, on a more personal level, I guess, than just looking at a name up on a facade.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And I think it's important because when you're just dealing with a hall or a wall of excellence, whatever they're calling it, the level of excellence, it's hard to get up there. You have to be really, really good for a really long time. And that means that people like John Gibbons or Edwin Encarnacion sort of get overlooked and don't get celebrated and recognized. So having space around the 100 level where you can recognize those people and honor them and write about them and tell their stories and show their memorabilia, I think that's important, because they were very important individuals for this franchise as well. So I think anytime you can kind of connect fans with the history that much more and honor people who made significant contributions that much more, it's only positive. It's only a benefit. It only creates a better connection for fans with the franchise. And it's kind of hard to see any kind of negative coming from that.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, and I don't want to be negative. It was just an interesting conversation we had on this show last week when this news came out, that this will be like a Hall of Excellence behind right field, as you mentioned, on the 100 level. And you can kind of walk through and you can see some trophies, you can see some memorabilia, you can see some different guys, being honored that maybe haven't been on the level of excellence. Does that mean that the current level of excellence is coming down? Because the debate we were having was, it is kind of nice that what they currently have, while not as expansive as it could be, is at least field facing, right? In between innings, you can kind of look up and see it right there, even from your seat. And, during ceremonies, when they want to point to these sorts of things, it is right there. Will that be removed, or how's that going to work to your knowledge?
So my understanding is there's going to be sort of one panel with everyone's names on it. So it's just going to be smaller. Whereas like now you get sort of a massive panel with a massive name. I think now it's just going to be sort of 1 or 2 panels with 6 to 8 names on it. So there will still be names up there, but it's just going to be a condensed version. It's going to be a bit smaller, but it'll still be visible from the stands.
Okay. See, I do like that. I want there to be something field facing, right, while you're there in the bowl and whatever else. So fair enough.
Yeah, it just won't be as dramatic as it is now.
And you're getting the best of both worlds. You can go take a walk through through the 100 level in right field and see it that way as well. So, look, the other big news here over the last week or so was the extensions for general manager Ross Atkins and manager John Schneider. We had already heard earlier in the offseason that Mark Shapiro was coming back. None of that should be surprising to anybody after going to a World Series. The one thing I did want to run past you was it seemed like John Schneider's 2-year extension, it felt weirdly short, and it's tacked on to this year, so he's technically got 3 years left. But often you hear of kind of minimum 3-year deals, 4-year deals, 5-year deals. I know he's still a young manager. Can you kind of take me inside what your thought would be on why it was just 2 for John Schneider?
I could see him valuing having the flexibility to renegotiate sooner. I don't know what the actual sort of salary ended up at and how that compares to the rest of managers around baseball, but I think, yeah, he could probably see some benefit in being able to sort of raise his fee in a couple of years. Right?
I'll take less now, but if we're as good as we expect to be, I'll be back in 2 years to talk about this.
Yeah, I think I think there could be value there to having that flexibility and having that bit of leverage down the road. So I could see how that could be a good thing for him. I think it's just, it depends. You see some organizations that only do like the 3 or 4 years for managers. You see some that do 5 or 6. So I'm sure there's that plays a part in it as well. But yeah, I think probably, and again, I'm speculating, haven't talked to him about it, probably he values having that flexibility in order to renegotiate in a few years.
That makes sense. It is opening day on Friday for the Jays, one of the last teams to get going. It's against Oakland. It's kind of a soft start, and then you're right into LA, and you kind of are off and running from there. I'm just sort of curious, coming into this, there seems to be a wide variance, and I know you're a guy who enjoys a good stat, enjoys a good number. There's a lot of room for variance here. We don't know what Cody Ponce is going to do coming from Korea back to MLB. We don't know what Okamoto, as we talked about earlier, is going to do coming from Japan into MLB. Can Ernie Clement repeat? There's some room here for what is this going to all look like? Are you confident that this is a good team? Are you confident that this is a division-winning team? Is it a team where you see some room for maybe some fall-off? Just in a general sense, what are you kind of expecting out of this team as we kick off the season?
I think this could be like a Central Division winning team. Unfortunately, they don't exist in one of the Central Divisions. Yeah, no, unfortunately, that's not where they exist. Yeah. So in the East, I mean, I can't say confidently it's a division winning team because the Red Sox are so good and the Yankees are so good and the Orioles are going to be a lot better.
Yep.
And the Rays will be better as well. Although I think that they are firmly the worst team in this division, but they could be like a 500 team, which is saying something as the worst team. There's no like White Sox or Angels in this division that everyone's just going to beat up on routinely. I think you could have 4 teams that all finish with like 84 plus wins, and then the Rays who have like 81. So it's just going to be so competitive. It's going to depend on who can stay healthy, who can kind of find advantages on the margins and deploy really well and strategize really well and just kind of exploit each other's weaknesses better than the others. And I think it'll ultimately like come down to head-to-head matchups in a really meaningful way. You know, last year the Blue Jays went 8-5 against the Yankees. If you flip that, the Blue Jays are in a wild card series,
right?
And the Yankees win the division. Yeah, you just flip just one of those games. Honestly, if the Blue Jays went 7-6, so the Blue Jays last year also went 8-5 against Boston, 7-6 against Baltimore. So they had winning records against all those teams. So that's going to be critical. Like it's obviously like it's important to beat the Oaklands and the Colorados and everybody else where you can, but those head-to-head interdivisional matchups this year, I think are going to be so important just because of how competitive the division is and like how those could really influence the error bars of like the win projections.
So they did here over the last day or so give us the final, official opening day roster. It could change on literally day 2 of the season, but one of the interesting names was choosing to keep Spencer Miles. Why has he's such an interesting case when you go back and look at him and how little he's pitched lately and the injuries that he's gone through. He's a guy that they chose to hold on to, and without diving into all the intricacies of it, if they weren't going to keep him, they have to give him back to San Francisco. They couldn't just send him down to Buffalo, so they have chosen to keep him around. What is it you think they see out of this guy that was worth kind of risking? I don't know, risking is too strong, but they have given him the final spot in the bullpen. What is it that they see, and do you agree with them?
Yeah, it's a very 2026 thing that a guy like a pitcher with a like 6 or 7 ERA in college and 14 professional innings can crack an opening day roster. It reflects how much teams value what's going on beneath the surface and how much just surface stats are just completely irrelevant these days. What the Blue Jays really like about Spencer Miles is obviously his stuff and what he throws. And there's a lot of guys around the league who are throwing 98 like Miles is, but what separates him from those other hard throwers in bullpens around the league is that he has three distinct fastball shapes. So he's got a four seamer that's like spinning up at the top of the zone with a bit of like natural arm side movement. And then he's got a two seamer that has like way more arm side movement and like just tails sort of in towards the right handed hitter. And then he's got a cutter, which like darts in the opposite direction. So it gets glove side movement on it. So it's like a triangle where the fastball is at the top of the triangle, the four seamer, the two seamer is to the right, and the cutter is to the left. And that just makes it really hard to square up Spencer Miles. Big league hitters are really good. They can get around on 98. If they know you only have one fastball, they can camp that fastball and sit on it in a certain spot and kind of guess their way to hitting a homer off of it. But if you throw three different fastballs that all move distinctly and have somewhat varying speeds, the cutter is slower than the two seamer and the four seamer, then you can just get off of the barrel of hitters and either create weak contact or get swing and miss. So I think that's kind of what separates Miles. It's you might like Corbin Burns kind of does it a little bit too as a starter, where he just uses different fastball shapes to get quick outs and to be really difficult to kind of do damage against. And then the other pitch for Miles is like his curveball, which is sort of, it's a bit harder than other curveballs. Throws at like 80 miles an hour, but it has a ton of movement. Probably has like as much movement as like a curveball you'd see from an Eric Lauer or Max Scherzer. But they throw theirs in the low 70s to give it enough time to get that break on its way to the plate. But Miles spins his curveball so well that he gets just a ton of movement on a pitch that he throws harder. Therefore, the hitter has less time to kind of track it, pick it up, and execute a swing against it. So that's the design. That's the theory with Spencer Miles. I haven't exactly tested it at a high level, right? So who knows? It might not go well. This is a guy who hasn't pitched higher than A ball, and that was in 2022. He's thrown 14 professional innings. So he might be sort of rough around the edges when it comes to making in-start adjustments or dealing with runners on base and the pitch clock and self-correcting and all those little things that go into it. This is just not a guy who's been on the mound much in affiliated baseball.
For a team who wants to contend this year, that shouldn't have a lot of like just gimme innings, right? Like it's an interesting choice they've made here.
It's a bet. And if it doesn't go well, they'll just return him to the Giants. Yeah. And that'll be that, right? So if it doesn't go well, he won't be on the team in May. No. But if it does go well, it's going to be quite a story.
100%. Take me inside as we look here right now at the lineup as it's constructed. One of the things that we saw last year was that the Blue Jays were not shy at all about making adjustments day to day based on the pitcher. We're going to go with a lefty here, and maybe this time we want a bit more of a power lefty instead of a contact lefty. Obviously talking about maybe this year a Sanchez versus a Lucas. These kinds of things. The way the Blue Jays are setting up, does it feel to you like there's going to be a lot of the same in terms of being very flexible every day, or have they boxed themselves in a little bit with some of the roster moves that were made over the course of the offseason here? Like Okamoto and Vladdy and Springer can't really do what he once did. Sanchez kind of is what he is. It does feel like there's a few less options. Am I off base with that?
No, they'll probably be a bit more regimented this year than they were last. And that's just because, Springer, Guerrero, Kirk, Varsho, Okamoto, Clement, Arger, Jimenez, like those are all pretty much everyday players,
right?
So that I just named like 7 or 8 guys. So you just don't have that much room to really maneuver. I think you hit on one of the big ones, and that's just the Sanchez and Lucas Of it all, and
Yeah.
it's like it's a bit of an inelegant sort of platoon because they're both lefties, but and you don't really want either of them facing a left-handed pitcher. Like Nathan Lucas did not get exposure to lefties last season, and Jesus Sanchez in his career has been just woeful against left-handed pitching. So it'll be interesting to see if either of them gets in against the lefty. But yeah, I think that with Lucas, you get more contact, and then with Sanchez, you get a lot more pop. So the Blue Jays will be deploying them strategically just based on the opposition pitcher and like how they give up damage, what parts of the zone they use, how their pitches profile, and sort of match up with the swing planes for Sanchez and Lucas. So that'll be one of the more interesting ones to watch play out. And then like David Schneider's role is pretty defined as, guys here to mash lefties. And we'll play corner outfield and maybe even a little bit of second base here and there. And then, yeah, Miles Straw obviously will get some run against lefties in the outfield and be a defensive replacement most nights, pinch runner. He brings a lot to the table as well. So I think we'll see some mixing and matching. Like the Blue Jays are always going to operate that way, but probably not quite as much as last year.
So last thing for you, I know we got to get you out of here, is the Vladdy of it all. And look, he had a good season last year for him. Everything's relative, but for him, it was a good year. But he went off in the playoffs, and he was still going off at the World Baseball Classic. Do you get the sense that this is a change in his approach, or just dial it up a little more in big games than I'm capable of doing through 162 games, which is fairly reasonable. It's a long season. It's hard to hold a certain level that long. I'm just curious if there's been any, to your eye, change in his approach based on the most recent games we've watched him play versus, a full regular season.
Yeah, something about the intensity of big games seems to bring out the best in him.
Yeah.
Which is what we've seen. And he's only played intense games, big games, meaningful games since the end of September. So that's all we've seen from him. And yeah, he's risen to the occasion in a pretty amazing way. It would be probably unreasonable to ask him to do that over 162. But I do think it is reasonable to ask him to have better than the 848 OPS he had last year and 28.3 home runs he had last year for 162. And that's going to mean just bringing that level of like intent and focus and intensity to a like mid-July day game against Cleveland that he does against the Dodgers in the World Series, or that he does against Team USA at the WBC when everybody is watching. So that's kind of the hallmark of great players, is that their effort, their intensity, like their doggedness is extremely consistent over 6 months. It's not easy to do, because it's like such a mental grind, a physical grind. Like the game really does kind of take a toll on you when you're playing it every day throughout a hot summer over like a season just feels unending. But I think that's probably what the next step for Vlad to get more out of himself, because I think it's pretty obvious that this is a guy who's capable of like hitting 330 with 35 homers in the big leagues.
Sure.
And that's, which I don't know, maybe Bobby Witt is the only other player on the planet, and Juan Soto are the only other players on the planet who are capable of that. And maybe Shohei, I guess, as well. Like it's such a upper tier exclusive list of players who have the talent.
Arden, at the beginning of spring training? Like somebody asked him specifically what was the difference in the playoffs. This was before the WBC. And yeah. I don't want to paint it in a negative way, because I don't think it was. But he was like, "Oh, I was listening to Dave Popkins." Like he kind of said, like I sold out more in the playoffs, or like, there was some sort of comment about I listened to the hitting staff more. And again, that's making it sound more negative than I mean to. But right. Do I remember that wrong, or do you know what I'm talking about here?
I don't remember that one.
Okay.
But it's with Vlad, it just seems like sometimes he just decides to take over a game, right? Like it just seems like he just has that power to just be like, all right, screw it, I'm just gonna go be the best hitter on the planet now. And it's just, you look at some of the pitches he gets his barrel to, and you look at the pitches he does damage against, and like when he is really understanding how a pitcher is trying to attack him and what they're trying to do to him. Mm-hmm. I mean, he could just be such a special hitter when he's really thinking along and he has a plan, and he's just a step ahead of what the pitcher's trying to do to him. So I think Vlad's gonna have a big year. I wouldn't be surprised if he, like I said, hit over 335 bombs, like walked more than he struck out. It's just going to be incumbent on him, like just bringing that intensity day in and day out. And when he slumps, because he will slump, all hitters slump,
Sure. Yeah.
not letting that snowball into like 3 to 4 weeks. Saying, all right, I've been slumping for 2 weeks now, and I'm getting myself out of it, and I'm pulling out of it, and I'm not going to let this continue. I'm going to do something to sort of break this spell. I think that when you let your slumps extend to 3, 4 weeks before you get out of them, that's when it can be really just damaging to your overall numbers.
So I don't know how much baseball you like to watch when you're not at the park. I'm sure you get your fill a little bit, but give me one team outside the AL East that if you're sitting down on a Saturday afternoon or a late night game or whatever it might be, that you're like, I think this team's on the come up, or this team people might be sleeping on a little bit, or there's some exciting guys over here. Give me one team that I should watch this year when the Jays are not on.
The Pittsburgh Pirates for me this year, I think, because I mean, Paul Skeens is worth a watch
Sure.
anytime he's on the mound. And then like O'Neill Cruz is just one of the most fascinating hitters to watch in the game. I mean, he's just like, he's such a freakazoid. Like he's like 6'7" shortstop. Like he just looks like he's not real. And then he's out there like stealing 40 bases and hitting balls like 116 miles per hour. And like, he's just, and playing shortstop. I mean, it's just wild. And then they've got a lot of like really interesting, young players on the come up, like they're going to have Bubba Chandler this year to start the season. And that's like, that's a pitcher who's, expected to be pretty good. You never know, but like he could be like, no one's like Skeens, but he could kind of be the like 1B to Skeens. Obviously, Connor Griffin didn't make the team out of spring, but I would expect that he's going to be up pretty much as soon as the service clock ticks over.
Exactly.
So he can't get a full year. So that's likely mid-April. So he ought to be up pretty quickly, and that's like the top prospect in the game. And then like out of the bullpen, you got, you got some interesting names. You got a Gregory Soto out there and a Mason Montgomery's kind of interesting. Denny Santana. I think Pittsburgh could be a postseason team, particularly in their division.
Yes.
It's the opposite of kind of what I said about the Blue Jays, right? Like in the NL Central, I mean, the Cardinals aren't trying to win. The Reds are hopeless. I expect the Brewers to take a big step back this year, like without Freddie Peralta, right? And having made some of the deals they made. The Cubs will be good. But like, I just think the Pirates can very much be in the mix for a wild card spot and probably finish second in that division to the Cubs and play in a wild card game. So I think that's the team that's on the come up.
All right. And for the sake of the good listener, if it's not on TV, Pittsburgh, obviously within striking distance from Southern Ontario. It's
and a great park.
Yeah, great game. Great place to see a game. So
beautiful place to visit. Yes.
We'll wrap this one up here, man. I know it's been a busy time. I know you're, for a lot of us, we're just getting ready to set out on this 6-month journey. You've set out on it a month and a half ago, so you're already built up in mid-season form, man. I know it's a busy week. Thank you so much for making the time, man.
Yeah, I'm just glad the games count now. The stats count, and I know everybody's trying their hardest and doing everything they can to win the games. So I'm very much looking forward to that on Friday. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Arden Zwelling is at sportsnet.ca, obviously on the broadcast throughout the year, and the At the Letters podcast I highly recommend. And so there we have it. Always enjoy talking to Arden. Every year, a couple times per season, he makes a little time for this show. Appreciate him for that, because the guy travels a lot, man. He's on the road with the Jays throughout the playoffs. He's off to God knows what. He could be covering the NLDS over here and then the ALCS over there, and very busy, but always answers the call when I bug him throughout the baseball season. So thanks so much to him. As I mentioned, later on Friday morning, normally these episodes drop around 5 o'clock in the morning. This will be significantly later than that, probably around 10:30. You'll hear from Kenny Walls of TSN 1200. Lots to get to with him. Rob returns on Monday. If you missed it earlier in the week, Graham Nichols was here, had a really interesting conversation with him about some of the NHL awards that are going to be handed out and how some of them are a little off kilter right now, are going to lead to some fascinating debates, plus the playoff races, obviously some Sens talk, and the Dominic Hasek era in the nation's capital, which is 20 years ago now, which, I don't know. I know for Sens fans, brings up a bunch of feelings. For me, it doesn't bring up any feelings other than, holy fuck, am I ever old? Because I remember that crystal clear. We'll wrap this one up here. Thanks again to Arden Zwelling for making time for us here today. It is Blue Jays baseball season. They are back for the next 6 months. You got baseball basically every night. I don't know what that does for you. It makes me really happy. Except for on the days it doesn't. And there will be a lot of those. It's just the way the game works, right? My name is Matt Robinson. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on Friday with Kenny Walls from TSN 1200. Catch you then.